Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce you to someone who needs no introduction, Mr. Knox T.
So as I begin, I'm going to ask the guy who sets the clock to reset it at 10 minutes back to 20 so that I don't violate the rules of 20 minutes. For many years, I had the opportunity and the privilege and the pleasure to serve many across southwestern Pennsylvania. For those years, serving at the Allegheny County EMS Council as the administrative officer, coming to the annual meetings, I had the opportunity to speak after Doug Garretson. I would stand in the back with my notes and I'd have a pen in my hand and I would scratch out everything I wanted to talk about and came to the end and had nothing listed on the paper, but of course I had something to say. Always have something to say. I would normally comment that Doug is such a hard act to follow, but today I have to follow Gary Harvat, equally a hard act to follow. I have to follow the others who came before me and those that came after me with similar stories and stories to tell. And quite frankly, I loved it when Gary turned up the house lights and I got to see people that I didn't realize were here. And I'll pick on Jeff West because I haven't seen Jeff for a long time, and buddy, it's great to see you. But if nothing else, Jesse and your team, thank you. Thank you so much for bringing us together. Thank you for bringing the recognition of EMS to the forefront. Thank you for taking the time and your talent and your team's talent to honor and recognize those of us today, but also to bring the others present so they could hear the stories. So hopefully you can tell your story into the future and be able to share what EMS means to you as an individual, as our industry. Quite frankly, we have failed in our careers not to publicize what we do. All too often, you hear about fire, police, and those other emergency service people. We are the ones, as EMS, that are first in and generally last out. We are the ones that are holding the hands of that patient. We are the ones that are calming them, making them quiet, and doing our best to take care of them. In my closing remarks, I was going to charge everyone, and I'll start that now, and just say to you all, if you're in the back of the ambulance, if you're in someone's home, take the opportunity to hold their hand. Talk to the patient. And I think that's something that we really lost in today's generation of EMS providers and physicians and nurses and others. But talk to the patient. Ask them a question. And if you use this, my favorite question, and especially for those who are a lot more mature than I, and that is, in your lifetime, what is the most significant thing that has happened other than your family? And think that today to each of you. What is the most significant thing that has happened in your life other than your family? And as you get older, look back on that. My neighbor, when I took her to the hospital, she responded to me something I had not heard. She was born in the 1920s, and her response to me was the women's right to vote. And so think about it. Ask your patient, ask your family, what is it that is important to them and has happened in their lifetime? Get to know your patients, share their experiences, and once again, do their care. Before I go too far, I want to take an opportunity to thank my family who is here. My brother, my sister and her wife, Carrie and Maggie, Kyle, Carrie, Maggie, and of course, Kim. I will tell you the story of Kim. She stalked me for 29 years. We met January 2nd, 1982, whenever she was sitting at a desk at Citizens Ambulance Service, and I walked in at 10 minutes after 8, and she was there. About an hour later, I came walking through. She had a cold cup of tea, and yes, it was very good because I tried it. And we became lifelong friends. It also helped that her birthday was the same as my sister's in January. and the 24th, and I'll let you know what year at another time because she's celebrating her 29th anniversary again this year. But the reality is, I remembered to call her on her birthday because of my sister Krista. And so for many, many years, Kim and I kept touch. A few years back, she was leaving a client, got stuck in traffic, and called my mom and dad's house, and we reconnected. And the rest, as they say, is history. She finally stalked me well enough that we were married. But family is something that today we're celebrating. As I look across the room and I look at the 11 other folks that are being recognized, I look at all of you that are here, you are family. You are our extended family, but you are part of the family known as Emergency Medical Services. For those spouses and family members here, I want to apologize for the time that we've taken your loved one out of the home during birthdays and celebrations and baptisms. Diane Fitzhenry told me a story a few minutes ago about Dan, and Dan was a mentor for me and so many, of how Dan had to leave the christening of his one son because of a little thing called Bloomfield's derailment. If you don't remember that, it was a train went down in Bloomfield. It made a lot of people nervous. And needless to say, the families, we apologize, but thank you for sharing your loved one with those of us around. Today we celebrate Legends of EMS. Not sure how I got there. It seems only yesterday that Gary Harvat was calling me an old-timer and coming to an old-timers dinner, and while I took offense to it, I walked into the room at Seven Springs and looked around and said, I might be an old-timer. I felt pretty good about that. I remember having dinner one evening with Glenn Cannon and Bob Full and Doug Gerritsen after we had a session with one of our state senators. And I'm sitting at the table and we were starting to talk, and I, for the first time in my life, probably didn't say a word. Listening to the stories of those three men as they bantered back and forth was phenomenal. That was worth the price of admission. And to realize that I was the newbie when it comes to EMS with those three men at the same table. The similar feeling that I have today with all of you in this room. Yes, I have some years in grade on many of you, but the experiences that we have, please share and share them together. And so as we stand here today and talk about why and how and why did we get into EMS, my story is a little bit different. I'm going to blame it on my grandparents. And you're going to say, why would you do that? Well, my grandfather, a dentist in Dravosburg, the first family dentist, my dad being the second, and my brother is the third, but my grandfather retired, and he moved to a little place called Chestnut Hill Farm, which if you hit a good wedge from at Seven Springs at the booth, you would land on the house that he built. Seven Springs. I was probably about 7, 8 years old when they did that. My father went over to Seven Springs as we did and enjoyed the pool and the game room and the actually shooting pool and all those fun activities. But my dad, being a super athlete, decided he wanted to learn to ski. So he and my mom learned to ski. The following year, off go 4 kids with him, lacing up our leather boots, putting on our laminated wooden skis, and whatever those things they called bindings, and we started to ski. My dad, in turn, decided to get us season passes. And so Dad and I would go up on a Friday, and we'd ski, and I'd stay at my grandparents' and walk up to the booth to hitch a ride in. I'd ski until it got busy, and then went home for a late lunch. Went back again and skied. What a way to be 13, 14 years old. Spending the weekend all winter skiing, and in the summer playing golf and swimming. What a great life I had. Until I turned 18. The family ski pass went away. I no longer qualified for that season pass under my father. I go to school at IUP. I'm walking through the student union, and I see an advertisement. You've all seen them. You have a poster, and you have this, pick the phone number off the bottom type of an ad for an IUP ski patrol. I said, that's a pretty good idea. Let's see. I have a limited income, 0. I have a somewhat money I'm getting from my folks. I can buy beer or I can pay for lift tickets. Duh. I'm buying beer, okay? I join the ski patrol, I can go ski. So, what's the first question after you call? You say, yep, you're on the ski patrol, thank you very much. We appreciate your service. What first aid course, do I have to take any training? Oh, there's no training required for the ski patrol. I said, well, that's pretty silly. Like Walt, I did that lifeguard thing, I did the water safety instructor thing. I know there's training out there. What should I do? So while in that same student union one day, I saw a catalog for the continuing education program, and I saw this thing called emergency medical technician. Had no idea what it was, no idea what it meant, other than it said first aid. I said, cool, I'll take the course. It was on 2 nights a week. It was on IUP's campus. If you remember Euler Hall, for anyone who was there, I went to the class, went through the class, met some people, and had a great time. And a guy by the name of Ron Reed, and I'm looking over to Kathy, and I'm not sure if Kathy would remember Ron, but some might. But more importantly, the day of our practical exam, I met Monty Jenkins. Now, some of you will remember Monty when he was at EMSI. And so we had the after exam festivity with Monty, and we're all happy he made it back the next week. But the reality is, I took this course, I completed this course, and now what do? I waited for 6 to 8 weeks. Will I get the big envelope or the little envelope? You all remember that. The big envelope had the certificate, a letter, and patches. The little envelope said, you get to try again. How time has changed. When my son completed the paramedic program at the Center for Emergency Medicine, as Walt called him, his half FTE, Thomas took the test online. He left the test, called me on the phone. I was in a meeting. I came out of the meeting at the EOC, and he said, Dad. I said, what, Thomas? He said, the computer shut off. I wasn't done yet. It was only an hour into it. What does that mean? Well, Thomas, it either means you passed or you failed. If you passed, you might get a big envelope. Not anymore. If you didn't pass, you'll get a phone call from Walt telling you that you need to come back in and have a discussion. Before he got home, on that damn smartphone, he looked it up on the National Registry site, and he passed. We didn't have telephones. We didn't have internet. We didn't have anything to tell us other than waiting for the big or the little envelope to arise. My, has EMS changed. But my desire was to pay for my skiing, to be able to ski and enjoy myself. Little did I know that that charted my career. As I moved through the skiing side of the house, I got to know some folks at Citizens Ambulance Service on Wayne Avenue. I walked in and met Danny Sacco for the first time. I became an observer. Back in those days, you got to do some ride-alongs and you'd see if you liked it. And you got to take some calls, and of course, that was voluntary. I then graduated to become a trainee. And as a trainee, my first ambulance call was on a seizure patient in Homer City, Pennsylvania, by the name of Charlie Held. A number of years later, Charlie jumped off a bridge into an area with no water below it. BJ Pino and I arrived. It was 1982. BJ over the radio asked for a helicopter, and Life Flight was just in service for a short period of time. Hoping that our 911 center would send a Life Flight helicopter, all of a sudden we go to where the LZ would be, and we found Sam Jack's Bellstar 222 sitting there. They took the bar out, the doors were open, said, yeah, put your backboard here, where do you want to go? We said, oh, we get to go. This will be fun. We flew the patient to Westmoreland Hospital and landed at the eventual site of Angel 2. With the assist of mutual aid, transported the patient to the hospital. Charlie didn't make it after that call. But once again, it was the first opportunity to use an aeromedical evacuation in Indiana County. It was the first ambulance call I ever had. And my life lesson on the first call was never, ever let Kevin Parrish drive again. I remember a call in Clymer Borough where I was also a police officer at one time, and yes, they let me put a bullet in my pocket. I did carry a gun, but it had to be unloaded. But I was working with, I think I was with Kevin Parrish again. Damn, that scares me. As we're bringing the patient out of the house, we need to make a 90-degree turn down the steps. There was no railing, and all of a sudden my foot was in air and no longer on the hard pavement. I sat the stretcher down. I ended up on the ground, and yes, as medics do, my pants were a little too tight. I go walking into the hospital, and he made me give a report. My shirt was untucked, and I walked in, and I was giving the report, and all of a sudden, the nurses all came around and said, "Hey, tuck your shirt in. What are you doing? You don't look professional." The stories of EMS, the camaraderie that we develop, the things that we have done over the years. While I talk about the early days, I could talk about for hours the college days, meeting Dan Fitzhenry as a mentor, and Glenn and Bob and many others. My time is out. Jesse, he was supposed to reset it. With that said, I do want to say a couple other things real quickly, if I may. Today, you're hearing of the history of EMS within this region, within our country, and hopefully your hometown. Take back and make it possible that you learn the history. Because if you don't know the history of where we came from, you're going to repeat that history. For providers today, talk to your patient. Treat the patient as a person. Treat their symptoms and maybe just hold their hand. For many years, I've already talked about my question to the older folks. In closing, thank you for recognizing all of us today. We are the legends, but people like Glenn Cannon, Jerry Esposito, Tom Streams, and many others were the foundation, along with Mary Ann Scott, Gary Burnworth, and the folks that started Allegheny County EMS Council. They are the foundation by which we, the legends, stand. And we continue to support those activities. And I thank all of you for being here today to listen to what those who came before you have said and can contribute. Please take the time to talk to each other before you leave. The stories that you hear today are stories that will continue with you for a lifetime. With that, I thank you so much. Jesse, to you and your team, thank you so very much, and we greatly appreciate it.